Sweetheart, let me give you some advice, since you're clearly too dumb to figure this out yourself. When I ask for sparkling water, I don't mean tap water with bubbles. I mean Perrier. The kind with the green bottle, that probably costs more than your hourly wage, sneered Marcus Whitfield, his $3,000 suit gleaming under the soft lights of Elevation, Chicago's most exclusive rooftop restaurant, where reservations had to be made 6 months in advance. His business associates chuckled nervously around the table, their laughter hollow as they watched the waitress, a tall, black woman with natural curls and warm brown eyes, absorb the insult with remarkable composure. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his Rolex catching the candlelight as he waved his hand dismissively at her, like she was a fly buzzing around his filet mignon. The woman's name tag read Nina, and at 35 years old, she had heard worse from better people. Though something about the casual cruelty in this man's voice stung differently tonight. The other diners at nearby tables had gone quiet, forks paused mid-air, conversations suspended as they witnessed the billionaire tech mogul whose face had graced the cover of Forbes just last month publicly humiliate a service worker for a mistake she hadn't even made. Nina took a slow breath, her fingers tightening almost imperceptibly around the serving tray she held against her hip. Sir, I apologize for any confusion. I did bring Perrier's right there beside your bread plate, unopened, exactly as you requested 20 minutes ago, she said, her voice steady as Lake Michigan on a windless morning, pointing to the distinctive green bottle that sat untouched where she had placed it. Marcus's face flushed red, caught in his own lie, but rather than apologize, he doubled down with the confidence of a man who had never faced real consequences for his behavior. Are you talking back to me? Do you have any idea who I am? I could buy this entire restaurant and fire you before dessert arrives. His associates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, one of them a younger man with kind eyes who had introduced himself as Daniel, looking down at his plate as if wishing he could disappear into it. Nina had seen this type of man 1,000 times before, born wealthy, handed everything, convinced that net worth determined human worth. The restaurant manager, a nervous man named Gregory, who had worked at Elevation for 15 years, rushed over with apology, already spilling from his lips before he even reached the table. Mr. Whitfield, sir, I am so terribly sorry for whatever has upset you. Nina is one of our finest servers. There must be some misunderstanding. Marcus cut him off with a sharp laugh that carried no warmth whatsoever. Your finest, please. This woman can barely comprehend a simple drink order. I've met smarter people working at gas stations. He turned to his associates with a conspiratorial grin. This is exactly what's wrong with this country. We put uneducated people in positions they can't handle, and then we're supposed to pretend they're doing a great job. Nina felt the familiar fire building in her chest. The same fire that had pushed her through every obstacle life had thrown at her: poverty, loss, doubt, and the constant underestimation of people who saw her brown skin and assumed they knew her entire story. Gregory placed a gentle hand on her arm, silently urging her to retreat to the kitchen, to let this blow over like they always did with difficult customers who spent more on one dinner than most families spent on groceries for a month. But Nina didn't move. Instead, she did something that would change the course of Marcus Whitfield's evening and, eventually, his entire life. She smiled. Not a forced servicey industry smile, but a genuine expression of someone who knew something no one else in that room knew. A secret that sat behind her eyes like a winning poker hand. Mr. Whitfield, I understand you're frustrated, and I genuinely hope the rest of your evening improves, she said, her voice warm and professional, despite every instinct screaming at her to tell this man exactly what she thought of him. Your server for the remainder of dinner will be Miguel. I hope you enjoy your meal. She turned gracefully and walked toward the kitchen, her head held high, leaving Marcus sputtering at her dignity. He had expected tears, perhaps our anger, or groveling apologies. Instead, She had given him nothing to feed his cruelty, and somehow that made him angrier. "Can you believe that?" he complained to his table, loud enough for surrounding diners to hear. "Completely incompetent and arrogant about it. People like that will never amount to anything." In the kitchen, Nina untied her apron with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear or shame, but from the effort of holding herself back. Chef Antonia, a fierce Colombian woman who had run Elevation's kitchen for a decade, appeared at her side with a glass of water and a knowing look. "That man is a pig, Mia. Don't let him into your head." Nina took a long drink and shook her head slowly. "He's not in my head, Tony. He's exactly who I needed to meet tonight." The cryptic statement made Antonia's eyebrows rise. But before she could ask what Nina meant, the back door of the kitchen opened and a well-dressed woman in her 60s entered, carrying herself with the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to power. "Ms. Douglas," Nina said, straightening immediately. "I didn't expect you until tomorrow." The older woman, Patricia Douglas, whose name appeared on buildings and university wings throughout Chicago, smiled warmly and embraced Nina like a daughter. "I heard you were working tonight, and I wanted to see how things were going. Besides, I have news that couldn't wait." The kitchen staff tried not to stare, but it was impossible to ignore the obvious affection between the legendary Patricia Douglas and their quiet, hard-working waitress. Patricia Douglas was Chicago royalty, a woman who had built a banking empire from nothing, who sat on the boards of hospitals and museums, who had been friends with 3 different presidents. "Let's talk in the office," Nina said, leading Patricia through a door marked private that opened into a surprisingly elegant room with leather chairs and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering Chicago skyline. Once the door closed, both women dropped their public composure and hugged properly. "I saw that man yelling at you through the window," Patricia said, her jaw tight with anger. "Do you want me to handle it? One phone call and Marcus Whitfield will never set foot in this building again." Nina laughed softly and shook her head. "Pat, you know I can handle men like Marcus in my sleep. Besides, he might be useful." Patricia's eyes widened with curiosity. "Useful how?" "That man is a snake. He's been trying to acquire my nephew's company for months, and the things he's said about Michael in the press, ... Nina's expression shifted to something more calculating. "I know. That's exactly why he's useful." The truth about Nina Johnson was a secret known to fewer than a dozen people in the world. The woman who had just been called dumb and incompetent by a billionaire was herself, worth approximately $47 billion, making her one of the wealthiest people in America and the wealthiest black woman on the planet. 20 years ago, she had developed an algorithm in her cramped apartment in the south side of Chicago that revolutionized data security for financial institutions worldwide. She had built her company, Secure Haven Technologies, from absolutely nothing, working as a waitress to pay rent while coding through the night, and when she finally sold it for an astronomical sum, she had done something unusual with her fortune. She had hidden it. No magazine profiles, no flashy lifestyle, no social media presence. Instead, she had created a complex network of trusts and holding companies that allowed her to move through the world as Nina Johnson, waitress, community volunteer, and anonymous philanthropist. She kept working at restaurants because she believed it kept her connected to the real world, to the struggles of ordinary people, to the person she had been before. Algorithms made her wealthy beyond imagination. "Patricia, Marcus Whitfield is trying to take over Nexus Innovations, right? Your nephew's company?" Nina asked, settling into one of the leather chairs and crossing her legs. Patricia nodded grimly. "He's been buying up shares quietly for months. Michael doesn't have the capital to fight him, and Marcus knows it. If he gets controlling interest, he'll gut the company and sell it for parts. 300 employees will lose their jobs." Nina's eyes drifted to the window, where she could see the lights of the city stretching toward the horizon, the same skyline she had stared at 20 years ago while wondering how she would pay her electric bill. What if Michael had a silent partner? Someone willing to match Marcus's investment and ensure he keeps control of his company. Patricia's breath caught. Nina, that would require at least $400 million. Nina smiled the same smile she had given Marcus earlier, the smile of someone holding all the cards. I know, I already had my people prepared the paperwork. I just wanted to meet Marcus Whitfield in person before I decided whether to move forward. The next morning, Marcus Whitfield strode into the conference room of Williams, Kraft and Associates, the most prestigious law firm in Chicago, ready to finalize his hostile takeover of Nexus Innovations. He was in an excellent mood, his humiliation of that waitress the night before already forgotten, replaced by the thrill of another corporate conquest. The conference room was filled with lawyers, financial advisors, and Nexus's young CEO, Michael Douglas, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Michael, my boy, this doesn't have to be painful, Marcus said with false warmth as he took his seat at the head of the table. Sign the papers, accept my offer, and you walk away with enough money to start something new. Fight me, and I'll bury you in legal fees until you're begging me to take this company off your hands. Michael's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, the conference room door opened. Marcus turned, annoyed at the interruption, and then his heart stopped. Walking through the door was the waitress from the night before, but she wasn't dressed like a waitress now. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost as much as Marcus's. Her natural curls swept into an elegant updo, her presence filling the room with an authority that made everyone, including Marcus, instinctively straighten in their seats. Behind her walked Patricia Douglas, and behind Patricia walked a team of lawyers Marcus recognized with growing horror, the legal team from Blackwood Capital, one of the most powerful private equity firms in the country, a firm whose mysterious controlling partner had never been publicly identified. Good morning, everyone. I apologize for being late, Nina said, taking the seat directly across from Marcus and folding her hands on the table. Traffic from the south side was terrible. Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. What? What is this? Why is the waitress here? Nina's smile was serene, but her eyes held the sharp focus of a hawk. Mr. Whitfield, we were never formally introduced last night. My name is Nina Johnson. I'm the majority stakeholder of Blackwood Capital, and as of 6 o'clock this morning, I'm also the largest shareholder in Nexus Innovations. The color drained from Marcus's face as the implications crashed over him like a wave. His lawyers began shuffling papers frantically, whispering to each other in urgent tones. That's impossible, he stammered. I've been tracking Nexus's shares for months. There's no way anyone could have acquired that much stock overnight. Nina slid a folder across the table toward him. You're right, I didn't acquire them overnight. I've been buying shares through various subsidiaries for the past 8 months. You were so focused on your own acquisition strategy that you never noticed the pattern. She leaned forward, and for the first time, Marcus saw the intelligence blazing in her eyes, the intelligence he had dismissed so completely just 12 hours ago. Did you really think the largest private equity firm in the Midwest was controlled by some old white man in a corner office? I built this empire while working double shifts at diners, and dreaming of a future people like you told me I could never have. Michael Douglas laughed out loud, the exhaustion on his face transforming into pure joy. Uncle Pat tried to tell me help was coming, but I never imagined, ... Marcus struggled to regain his composure, his mind racing through options, exit strategies, any way to salvage this situation. Ms. Johnson, perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. I'm sure we can come to some arrangement that benefits everyone. I'm a reasonable man, and I can see that I may have underestimated certain aspects of this deal. Nina held up her hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Mr. Whitfield, I'm not interested in arrangements with you. I'm interested in protecting a company that employs 300 people who depend on those jobs to feed their families. I'm interested in supporting a young CEO who built something meaningful instead of inheriting it. And I'm interested in showing you that the people you dismiss as dumb and uneducated are often the ones quietly building empires while you're loudly tearing them down. She stood, buttoning her jacket with the casual confidence of someone who had already won. Your takeover bid is finished. Nexus Innovations will remain under Michael's leadership, with Blackwood Capital as a supporting partner. You are welcome to sell your shares back to us at yesterday's closing price. Or, you can remain a minority shareholder with no voting power. The choice is yours. Marcus's associates from the night before had also been summoned to this meeting, including Daniel, the young man who had stared at his plate while Marcus berated Nina. Daniel's eyes were wide with amazement as he watched his boss's complete reversal of fortune. This isn't over, Marcus growled, rising from his chair with as much dignity as he could muster. I have connections in this city that go back generations. You think you can just waltz in here? And Patricia Douglas stepped forward, her voice cutting through his bluster like a blade. Marcus, I've known your family for 40 years. Your father would be ashamed of the man you've become, not because you lost this deal, but because of how you treat people when you think no one powerful is watching. Nina showed me the footage from last night. Half of Chicago's elite were in that restaurant. By tomorrow, everyone who matters will know how Marcus Whitfield behaves when the cameras aren't rolling. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus looked genuinely afraid. His reputation was the foundation of his empire, and Patricia Douglas had the power to crumble that foundation with a few well-placed phone calls. The meeting ended with Marcus's lawyers hustling him out of the conference room before he could do any more damage to himself. In the aftermath, Michael Douglas embraced his aunt and then turned to Nina with tears in his eyes. I don't know how to thank you. You saved everything my team has worked for. Nina placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't need to thank me, Michael. Just build something that matters. Create jobs. Treat people with dignity. That's the only return I need on my investment. Patricia walked her to the elevator, their arms linked like old friends. You could have revealed yourself at any time, you know. Last night, when he was insulting you one word, and he would have crumbled. Nina nodded thoughtfully. I know, but that's not the point, Pat. If I only demand respect when people know I'm wealthy, then I'm not really fighting for respect at all. I'm just fighting for deference. The waitress at that restaurant deserves the same basic dignity that Nina Johnson, the billionaire, deserves. Until men like Marcus understand that nothing really changes. Word spread quickly through Chicago's business circles about what had happened in that conference room. The story grew with each telling the billionaire who had mocked the waitress, only to discover she was the silent power behind one of the city's most influential firms. Reporters tried to track down Nina for interviews, but she declined them all, returning to her anonymous life as quietly as she had briefly emerged from it. 6 months later, Marcus Whitfield's company faced a series of setbacks that many attributed to his damaged reputation. Investors pulled out. Partners distanced themselves, and eventually he was forced to step down as CEO of his own firm. Some said he deserved it, while others thought the punishment too harsh. Nina took no pleasure in his downfall. Revenge had never been her motivation. Her motivation was sitting in a community center on the South Side, where she volunteered every Saturday teaching coding to teenagers from backgrounds just like hers, kids who had been told they would never amount to anything, kids who saw limited futures because the world saw limited potential in them. Daniel, the young associate who had witnessed Marcus's behavior at the restaurant, reached out to Nina a few weeks after the conference room confrontation. He had quit his job with Marcus and was looking for something more meaningful, something that aligned with his actual values rather than just his ambition. Nina met him at a small coffee shop near her apartment, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, completely unrecognizable as the billionaire who had reshaped Chicago's business landscape. Why do you keep doing this? Daniel asked, genuinely curious. The waitressing, the anonymity, you could live like a queen, and instead you live like ... He gestured helplessly at their modest surroundings. Nina smiled and wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. Like a normal person. Daniel, I am a normal person. The money didn't change who I am. It just gave me the power to protect who I am. When I work at that restaurant, I remember what matters. I remember that every person I meet is fighting battles I can't see. I remember that dignity isn't something you earn through success. It's something every human being deserves from birth. Years later, Nina would establish the largest scholarship fund for first-generation college students in American history, sending thousands of young people from underestimated communities to schools that had once seemed impossibly out of reach. She would never give interviews, never seek recognition, never allow her face to appear in any publication. But her impact rippled outward in ways she would never fully see in the engineer who had once been one of her coding students, in the doctor who had received her anonymous scholarship, in the small business owner whose loan had been quietly guaranteed by one of her foundations. Marcus Whitfield eventually wrote her a letter of apology, which she accepted graciously without ever responding. She didn't need his apology, just as she had never needed his respect. The only thing Nina Johnson had ever needed was the same thing every person needs: the chance to prove what she was capable of when someone gave her the opportunity. She had created that opportunity for herself, and now she spent her life creating it for others. Because in the end, she had learned the truth that Marcus Whitfield was forced to discover in that conference room. True power is not measured by how you treat those above you, but by how you treat those you believe to be beneath you.